welcome back. First of all, let's start there. I'm going to let the speakers introduce themselves, and so without further ado, just hand it over to them.
Thank you, Keith. Hi, welcome to the Centering Human Solarpunk panel workshop. Just as a heads up, this is an experiential workshop which includes the visualization, so please do not listen while driving or doing anything else where you cannot close your eyes safely. The workshop is being recorded, so if you are doing something, you can always watch it later. All right, safety first. The other panelists will introduce themselves, but we are all authors in Solarpunk Creatures, science fiction and fantasy anthology by World Weaver Press that came out last January, which featured stories about or including non-human beings. Personally, one of my main reasons for reading and writing SFF is experiencing the other, be they humans in different contexts, like time periods, planets, etc., or non-human animals here on Earth, aliens, gods, dragons, or any other form they might take. The aim of this workshop is to explore how we can learn to see ourselves from the outside as pieces of a larger puzzle, and how we can remove ourselves from the central position in the universe and come away with narratives that we can act upon. There, that's me. Oh, did I say my name? I'm Rodrigo Gulagovsky. My pronouns are he, him, el. Welcome.
And I'm Jerry Jarit. My pronouns are she, her. I write fiction, and I have 7 Solarpunk stories published, of course, one in here with all of these wonderful authors. I have another one coming out in Through the Portal, A Hopeful Dystopia, which is kind of a strange name for it, but it's a Solarpunk story, and it's by Exile Editions in Toronto. For me, writing Solarpunk is a way to combine my activism with the joy of fiction. So the story in here is called The Wetlands versus the Mayor, and it let me explore the inside of a wetlands and a forest. And I wrote that story expressly to protest more clear cutting of forests and more paving over of wetlands. That's happening a lot in Ontario, I'm very sad to say. I'm fighting it. Anyway, I used a bit of humor in my story. So storytelling gives you the opportunity to draw people in and entertain them and make them think. I also just finished writing a Solarpunk novel. It's about a single mom with a teenager, and it's lighthearted with a dash of romance, looking for an agent. As well, finally, I direct a Solarpunk festival in this chunk of Ontario. So it's called YouthImagineTheFuture.com, if you look it up. Our mission is to help combat the rise of climate anxiety and climate depression among our youth by encouraging them to look towards solutions. According to studies by several universities, climate anxiety is growing rapidly among young people who are often left out of the conversation. So I go into high schools with an inspiring slideshow of climate solutions that are being used around the world right now, such as rewilding cities, planting small Miyawaki forests and sponge parks, using small river turbines, green and solar roofs, use alternatives to concrete and parking lots. We do some creative writing together or sketching to imagine how things could look better, especially right where they live. And then how things could work better if we all work together to dump fossil fuels and restore biodiversity. So now I'm going to pass this over to AE, who's doing very cool things.
Thank you, Jerry. I'm AE Marling, he, them, and I'm most known for my projection activism. May have heard about when I shown Space Karen on Twitter headquarters in San Francisco after Elon Musk took over. I also try to get the word out about Solarpunk, projections such as make solar, not war. Now, as an extension of my activism, I decided to write Solarpunk science fiction. Solarpunk can fight despair and can dispel the propaganda that there is no alternative to capitalism. The first step to freeing people from oppression is to give them hope. Now, in Solarpunk Creatures, I combine 2 of my favorite interests, which are solarpunk and horror, the horror genre, writing about crows attacking solar panels. This is inspired by true events in Japan. Crows are dropping rocks, or were dropping rocks on solar panels, and I found this so incredible. I'm surprised I was the first writer to publish a story about it. Previously, I've written a noir solarpunk story called Murder in the Tool Library, where I feature library economies, and I'm working on one featuring transhumanists called Missing Mermaid as another mystery. And I'll pass it on to my next panelist.
Thank you, AE. I'm Bright Flame, and I use she and they pronouns. I'm on this panel because this session is really dear to my heart. And of course, I wrote one of the stories in the Solarpunk Creatures anthology. Lifting interconnections among all our Earth kin is core to my writing and my teaching and my living. The story I have in the anthology, Thank Geo, is set in the solarpunk future of many of my short pieces. You'll find some of them published various places, where trees, humans, mycorrhizae, and other Earth can work together to thrive. I'm going to put a link to my nonfiction article about such things in the chat. I wrote that article for the center I co-founded at Columbia University. I'm celebrating the upcoming release of my debut Lunarpunk Solarpunk novel, The Working. See behind me, that's the cover reveal. As Starhawk mentioned, I'm part of the global ecofeminist reclaiming tradition of witchcraft, and I offer workshops aligned with solarpunk, not only for pagans, but also for educators and practitioners of various sorts. You'll find lots more about me in my bio and on my blog, on my website, and all over social media. I'm going to put some things, some goodies in the chat, as I hope my co-panelists or my co-workshop facilitators will. And we'll also dump them in again at the end to make sure everybody sees them. Thanks.
Thank you, Bright Flame. Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm Anna. My surname is pronounced Soon. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a science fiction and fantasy writer based in the southeast of England, though I was born much closer to the equator than that, in a lot warmer place. Most of the stories that I have that have been published are adaptation stories, because I kind of believe that we need to take the time to really explore and play out how the future could look like in positive ways, but also in, I don't know, maybe like more pragmatic ways too. My Solarpunk Creatures story is a bit like that. It's called Night Files, and it's set in the city of Brighton, which is not very far away from me. And it retells a famous 1964 street battle between two gangs called the Mods and the Rockers, but in the form of seagulls and jackdaws, which are birds which are very common in this region. And it's set in a future that involves collaboration with local fauna in how we govern resources. I'm very fortunate to live in a transition town, and my local activism is really much more in the arts. I'm involved with nature writers locally and artists and poets to create sort of like awareness of our local areas like rivers and our Winterbourne stream, which is very, very special here. So hopefully we'll have a poetry collection coming out later on in the year. And I think that's all we're going to say about ourselves, believe it or not. And so this session now is for everybody to take part in. You're in for a treat today. In true solarpunk fashion, this is going to be very collaborative and a hands-on session. So I'll invite Bright Flame to lead us now on a beautiful visualization.
Thank you, Anna. As Rodrigo said up front, if you're driving, if you're operating a chainsaw or other dangerous things, get off now. Don't listen to me. This is a visualization I'm going to lead to begin the work of decentering we humans among all of our Earth kin. And in my tradition, we call such a visualization a trance journey. So I invite you to get comfortable, which might be sitting, it could be being off camera, lying down, or standing so you can move around freely. You might want to close your eyes. You might also want to have some paper and pen in front of you to doodle or just kind of capture images. Some people work better that way, can get into such a visualization better that way. I also want to say there's no right or wrong way to do this. Don't censor what comes in. Don't try to force images. It might not be like a motion picture before your eyes. It might just be, oh, you get this information, you have a feeling for it, a sense for it. So breathe with me and relax. Relax, relax. And if you're gonna close your eyes, allow them to close as you continue to breathe. I invite you to picture where you live or a place that's really important to you. Picture it as if you're there. Immerse yourself in all the sensations and textures and sights and sounds of where you live or that place that you want to bring to mind, the real place, if you would. Notice what's in your immediate surroundings. Notice where you stand or sit and what's right around you. The feelings in your body of being in this place. Whether you're indoors or outdoors. Noticing who else is around, if there are others. And I invite you, if you are indoors, to go outside to get a bit of a wider view of this place where you find yourself. And maybe you want to move around a little bit and notice what the ground is like there. If you move around, what's below you, what's under your feet in this place? Is it pavement? Is it soil? Are there plantings? What are the structures like in this place? Move about like as if you're taking a tour. Perhaps letting yourself imagine you're here for the first time and really taking in all the sensations, all the sights, the sounds, the smells. What's it smell like? Maybe you're in an urban area. Maybe you're in a rural area. Wherever you are, take it all in. Feel all the sensations of being there. And then widen your view to get a picture of the whole ecosystem of this place so that you're noticing perhaps the terrain, the high parts like the hills and the low parts, or maybe it's very flat. Noticing any waterways, noticing human infrastructure, how it's spread across this ecosystem. Notice where the humans are, where humans live and how they move about. Maybe the transportation systems, for instance, what they do in this ecosystem. Just let it all flow in, all the details that you can put yourself into as if taking a tour. Just notice all these things. Notice the whole ecosystem. The green or the not green. any animals that are in this ecosystem, where the humans congregate, where they shop or go about their business. And again, noticing any of the non-human animals that might be in this ecosystem, from the minute, the insects, to the larger mammals, amphibians, the flying ones, where they are, how they move about in this ecosystem. The plants, from the micro, like moss, and the little wild ones that might poke up through pavement or some kind of soil that's around you, to the larger plants, the trees, the shrubbery, the herbs, the food plantings. The fungi and the lichen. Maybe you see mushrooms sprouting somewhere in this ecosystem. Maybe you see lichens on rocks or trees. Keep moving about, whether you're walking or whether you imagine yourself flying, and really take it all in. This ecosystem as it exists now, for real. Let your imagination, your visualization, your mind's eye go to wherever it is that you're called to look closer. Noticing the humans who are around and what they're doing. Perhaps noticing different generations, how they're interacting. And noticing how humans relate with non-human creatures. And now that you're immersed in this landscape, this ecosystem, imagine that ecosystem if humans were decentered. If humans were interconnected with all of our other earth kin, all of the non-human living beings around us, but not the dominant or dominating species. Don't force any images, just let information pop in for you, and don't censor. Imagine the ecosystem, the same ecosystem where you find yourself, if we humans were not the central beings there. What would change in the ecosystem? You might take a look at the infrastructure. How would it change if we were not the central, the dominating species? Infrastructure like the power grid, or how energy is formed. Infrastructure like where food for humans is grown, and how it's moved about and how it's prepared. How would that change if humans were not centered in that ecosystem? What would change in the way humans live? What are perhaps our homes look like? And how humans congregate, where we congregate, if we were not the central beings, but in interconnected relationship with all the living beings, in reciprocal relationship, equal with all other living beings in the ecosystem. What would change? Let your mind wander to notice different things. Again, a tour guide of this imagined landscape, the same ecosystem that's real for you, but now shifted so humans are not the central characters in that story. You might bring to mind different species and notice where they are in this shifted landscape, this shifted ecosystem. Where are the trees, the woods, the forests? How do they thrive among all the species? How about the little ones, the spiders, the ants, the beetles, the butterflies, the moths? Where are they? How do they thrive interconnected? How do humans now relate with them? How are all the beings, all the living beings that we share the ecosystem with, how are they fed? Where do they get their food? What is shared? What are shared resources among humans and non-humans alike? Let your mind go to any place that strikes your fancy. Use your imagination without censoring. And know that you can take this little tour on your own outside of what we're doing together, because it's time now to return and maybe share what came through in breakout rooms. So make sure you're back in your body. If you went far, if you went wide, maybe tap your edges. Feel yourself standing or sitting or lying on the ground, and you might say your name out loud, but on mute. And clap yourself back, clap your hands, make sure you're present and able to interact with all of us once again. And Anna, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Bright Flame. Welcome back, everybody. So now what we're going to do is we will put you into a breakout room in very, very small groups. And what we'd like you to do is take a few minutes, just a couple of minutes, to share any salient thoughts you have with each other. And just two small requests. Take note of your breakout room number, because we'll need that a bit later on. And also decide if one person in your group is going to be the one, preferably the one joining on a computer to make it easy, who can take notes or recount notes to everyone later on. So if we're all ready, Kes, would you mind putting us out into breakout rooms? Thank you. Well, welcome back, everyone. I'll just repeat what Kay said in case you've just dropped back in. Yes, sorry, Carl. We didn't have much time for everyone to share. We're not as big a group as we feared we might be, so I think it's possible for us to share as a group here, if you like. Also, raise any thoughts that has come to you when you were in your groups. Rifling suggested that we should share in the chat to make it easier. So if you want to take a couple of minutes and summarize the thoughts or your thoughts in your group or yourself into the chat, and maybe that will give us some talking points. Shall we do that? Take a couple of minutes.
And those of us facilitating can read some of the highlights out of the chat and invite others to speak. Transparent moment here. Reconciling our ways of creating pathways through natural areas. Oh, reconceiving.
I do like reconciling as well. I like both words.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Magical typo.
Let me read out Kara's. My biggest impressions on changes were around housing and transport, things like more land bridges to help wildlife cross roadways. That's really awesome. We could build around things rather than destroy them. Notice I didn't have any thoughts about food resources. Would anyone actually like to read those out? If you would like to, if you want to, just unmute and I'll defer to you and you can take the mic.
And anyone who would rather not type, if you want to speak what you got, what came through for you out loud, just unmute.
I'd be happy to talk about my group. I think we're group 4. Correct me, team, if I'm wrong. So we were doing a round just describing, we ran out of time, describing where we were and where we were visualizing. And then we just started getting into kind of what it was as we were decentralized. The ocean was important to all of us. So Luca was near a seaside park with dunes and sand and birds and people in a very blustery place. I live in a downtown park area in the Pacific Northwest. So it's very green with trees and leaves. And since it's Saturday morning here, it's market day. So there's a lot of people bustling, driving, hawking, walking dogs and children and doing market activities. And our third person, I forgot your name, I'm sorry, was visualizing a tropical place, and she was just getting into discussing that. So talking for myself, I found, just a comment for everyone, I had a really hard time. I found it difficult actually to the old dichotomy to decenter without excluding humanity. So I'll just leave it at that.
I can share what we discussed in group 6. Rachel, who lived in Toronto, said that they had buried her rivers and then said those rivers might be freed and instead modes of transportation, especially public transportation, could be buried. Alex mentioned that there are safe noise parameters which can be met so wildlife is not startled or disturbed. And I imagined a park, and I think that the high voltage power lines would no longer carry that crackling energy in an inefficient manner. Instead, we'd have more decentralized power, and there might be controlled burns instead of cattle grazing the land.
Would anyone else like to share? I see. Luca, you had a comment in there.
Yeah, I was in group 4 with oh gosh, Alan, I think. So we covered that a bit. I thought it was interesting. We both kind of picked similar places. We both live near lakes and have vegetable gardens going. So that was just an interesting connection.
Anyone from other groups? Sorry. Jerry, you are on mute.
Right. I think I was with group 3, and all of us had trouble reimagining the place we grew up, which was really suburbia inside an urban city without a lot of nature. I had trouble imagining it differently. However, one of the participants is from Chicago, and there's a project called the Wild Mile in the Chicago River where they've rewilded it. Started in 2017, and it's about 160 linear feet of floating wetlands they put in, which is pretty incredible. And around the world, there's a lot of cities who are either trying to not just clean up, but rewild the wetlands and the rivers and creeks that go through their cities by backing people away from them instead of like putting in cement piers and edges so you can, sit on a bench. Instead, backing people away and planting, bringing back the earth and planting the native species shoreline plants. And it's bringing back pollinators and a lot of health to the city and the people as well. There's another group of people that are trying to uncover buried rivers. I know in Toronto, there's a lot of rivers and creeks that were paved over. And there's, you can go on a walking tour in Toronto to see where they used to be. And there's an effort to uncover as much as you can, bring it, I forget what it's called, bringing the rivers back to light. And that is a beautiful idea. And I think that's something maybe we should all, talk to our mayor and council about doing or participate in.
I'm just noticing how many people felt it really difficult to shift towards a decentered human experience, which makes sense because that's not the world that we tend to live in, perhaps unless we are indigenous to the land. So just notice that.
Okay. Thank you, everyone, for your contributions. Is there anyone else who just wants to wrap us up?
Great. So it's so great that we're all sharing ideas. Thanks. So I think back to Anna, who's going to put us into the next section of our program.
For the next little while, everyone, we are going to reorganize ourselves and think about, in each of our breakout groups, so these are going to be slightly different groups, what would we have to do to change, to arrive in this more interconnected world? What would the challenges be? What are our challenges now? And as each of us who are active actors in part of this world that we live in, what are the first steps we can take to help people around us, ourselves, decentralize human beings in our ecosystem? So Kes is going to do some magic and assign us into slightly different groups so we can re-exchange ideas and chat more. Thank you, Kes, for doing all the wrangling. And I will see you back in a few minutes.
Okay, rooms have been created, recreated, and you're good to go join them.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back. Have we lost anyone? Did everyone make it back? I think we're good. So do each of us want to take a little bit of time to just like recap some of the thoughts from there for posterity purposes?
What did you say me?
Well, if you like, Jerry, please go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. Did you call somebody else? I just thought you saw Jerry. You said Jerry, and I was leaning forward to read something. I don't want to
but I can.
hog it. But we had an amazing group, and everybody had something really valuable to say. It was really great. Rodrigo, why don't you speak?
Well, I thought there were some very interesting points made. I'll paraphrase, but everybody can just speak for themselves. Kara talked about starting with things that other people were already doing, like getting rid of lawns and wild plants. Luca told us very interesting thing happening in San Francisco with a fort that was sort of rewilding itself because it had not been used. It wasn't being used anymore. And Trish told us a little about how hard it was in Central Phoenix to get rid of the human centered viewpoint. And we had an interesting conversation. Trish also told us a little about complex adaptive systems, which was very cool, about the need that none of the solutions are static, that the solutions will always be evolving because the problems themselves will be evolving as we deal with unintended consequences, which is a very interesting idea, both practically and as an author. It gave me a few story ideas. So thank you for that.
Yeah, maybe Kara, do you want to speak a bit more about what you said? You made it so real.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking of a very concrete example, which was the place that I was most recently living. Was a neighborhood where my roommate and I wanted to let the lawn be less just grass. Like there is still grass, but luckily that yard already had wild sweet violet and strawberry and clover and all these other things that we wanted to encourage that and let it grow. But we keep getting these citations from the city about the length of the lawn. And so kind of a compromise, we were like, okay, well, the front yard needs to look a certain way to be whatever. But the backyard, we used to let it be much more wild. And we have bunny rabbits and deer coming to shelter in the backyard, which feels like such a blessing to me. And now that I don't live there anymore, but my roommate still owns that house, now the citations are specifying you have to do the backyard too. And it really just feels like, why isn't this more of a thing? Because there are places where people know that this is something that's good for the environment and people are allowed to do it. So it really feels like it has to be a direct argument. It feels like it has to be an argument, but it has to be a direct discussion with the city to be like, no, this is a thing that's actually good for the environment. You should let people do this who want to. There is somebody else on the street who got rid of their tree lawn and made it gravel, but that's the only other thing I've seen there.
Yeah, there does have to be an active group that speaks to your mayor and council, but there are larger groups people have been doing this city by city that you could probably contact to help you and make that presentation to the city and get that changed.
Can feel overwhelming when you're up against the city or other government or bureaucracies if you're by yourself. But remember, you don't have to be by yourself. It is important in all of this to build community. And one way to do that is to go attend a local garden or start a local garden and talk to people. Alice in my group 2, I think, shared about how she was doing that and learning about permaculture. I'm going to one of my local gardens, which donates food to food banks. And it is important to build in community in some way so you can gather power and then oppose like weird city ordinances, bad city ordinances, or corporations which are, bribing public officials to hold back progress.
Great thinking.
Hey, would you like to continue and sort of summarize any other thoughts from the group? You've started.
Well, I started. I think those are the ones that I understand. If anyone else in my group would like to share as well, that'd be ideal.
Alex talked about native groups, sort of like having native plants already in the space, and thinking about sort of like, but it's not necessarily thinking about it as an ecosystem. And they were talking about inviting nature into our homes as well, as just have that connection. And Alex, obviously, like, please correct me if I got that wrong. And I didn't catch all of what Alan said, unfortunately. So, Alan, if you want to have a minute to just thank you, Alex.
Hi, everyone. I think talking about native species and everything, this applies. I was discussing just at the end before our group closed some of work I'm doing around a local forest where it's currently an industrial plantation and a tree farm. And we're wondering what to do with this thing. And the challenges is really, we spent 70 years now transforming this landscape into something we extract from. And the work required, whatever is decided we do with this, it's going to take a lot of work to change it into something else. And, these ideas of rewilding right now, there's all sorts of non-native species inside. It's actually heavily used by people because there's a lot of roads. So there's all sorts of activities going on. And I think these are great things in a lot of ways, but it also presents a lot of challenges. And we're still in the very early stages of imagining what this looks like and what we can do today, while remembering this is going to be a generational and multi-generational process as, we turn the forest into whatever we decide it to be. And so those are, just the types of things I'm thinking about.
Can I pop into that, Alan? So there's an indigenous forest here it's just started. And I was speaking to Maureen Buchanan, who's the Anishinaabe woman who's they're not really leading it, but she's kind of leading it. And she was giving me a tour of the forest the other day. There's a food forest and a medicine forest. Anyway, she said, she thinks her job or their job is to help the forest and the land, help the land remember who it is. And I just love that way of thinking. And by weird coincidence, I just watched a video last night when I couldn't sleep, and it was set in Sweden. And it had this lovely woman about my age, about 60, and she had inherited a forest that was a monoculture spruce that her grandparents had, mowed down, a regular forest, and planted all the same so they could make a fortune off it. And then her parents did the same thing, and she didn't want to do that, and they started to die because monocultures are often there was some insect eating them because they're all the same. So she went through a depression because the forest was dying and she loved it. And then she started planting little trees and shrubs that she found on the outsides of the forest and the ditches and on the roads within like I'm guessing a 5-mile region. And she'd bring them in and plant them randomly in the forest. So when she got to 100, she started to feel better, even if it wasn't going to work. And when she got to 1,000, she invited a biologist in who said, "You've done it. You've just helped the forest remember its heart. And now it will be able to survive. Just keep doing that."
That's wonderful, Jerry. I think we need to wrap up because we're 5 minutes into the break, which thankfully there is a 15-minute little buffer there. But I took some notes from room 3 that I'll summarize quickly, which we were Alex and Alicia and Rachel in there, and I didn't write down who said what, but the need to start small. I think Rachel said, just as you're making any change, just notice how you're impacting and how you can help all the other species thrive. I think it was Alicia who said about our mental health. Was that you, Alicia? About how our mental health is connected to the more than human world, that we're all interconnected in that way. So Alicia is just out of a social work program, I think you said. Yeah, I'm just kind of quickly summarizing here. Let's see. That we need to be in the mind and or body, I think, Alex, you were saying, of other species to know how to relate with them and how they can best thrive. So asking, like literally asking, that's some of my writing is about, really developing the communication, because they all speak in various languages that we just don't know yet how to listen to, most of us. So I think that brings us to a close, yeah? But also, let's continue all this good information sharing and thought sharing in the discourse, in the Discord discourse. There should be a channel set up for our
Thank you,
session.
everyone. Thank you, everyone,
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
for bringing yourself to this session. I will continue the conversation over there. Thank you so much.